So yeah, that's your reminder. You have 2 weeks left and 3 until you present. So that would be this week and next week. Oh, I think there's a thing I have to approve. So I think you have an assignment this week that has like topic submission. And all that is I just want to know what you're doing. And it might even say something like plus 1 or 2 sources. Because I want you to pick a topic, research it a little bit, and see if it's either, because some people choose like cold weather adaptations. And that's a really broad, so you need to like narrow that down to like college age males or college age females and cold adaptations. So that's where we're like, I want to approve it and maybe critique it to fine tune it so that it's not super broad and there's just so much information. I do highly recommend this. My wife does this when she was in college, and I didn't do it. I should have. Is I would take Monday and Tuesday of break and spend an hour each day and just write the paper as much as you can so that when you come back after break, you can then take it to the Student Success Center, or I think that's what they call it here. Whatever people can like critique your paper and that kind of thing so that it's ready to be taken there. And so you're just fine tuning it the week after break before it's turned in. And then you can, I recommend write your paper and then turn it into a PowerPoint. Is much better. That way you have all the information already and you're basically just taking excerpts out of your paper and putting it into. You will have to use Turnitin, so it's going to do plagiarism checks. So make sure if you quote something to put it in quotations. If you paraphrase it, make sure you put sources from it. Yes. Yep, there's a whole separate PowerPoint turn in. So unlike the journals where it's all in one spot, there's 2 separate ones if I remember right. So we are working on the youth and the adults, on what your body is going to do as you mature. So growth, the size of the body increases, or part of the body. Development is different than growth. That would be differentiation. So different people are going to go at different rates. That's why you have like some students that are tall, some that are short, some get puberty early, some get puberty later, and they get those growth spurts at different times. Like your 5th and 6th grade girls are all going to be taller than pretty much the boys because they get their growth spurt before the guys. And then 7th and 8th grade hits and all the guys are going to sprout up again after that. So you're going to have different maturations. So you're going to have your chronological age. So that's like how old the actual person is. And then your skeletal age is actually like how tall it is in comparison. Some people sprout up early. Some people sprout up later. My son right now is on the very low side. When we took him in, his height and weight, his BMI was in like the 3rd percentile. So he was still on the chart, so they weren't like worried, but they could also see that my son runs and moves and never sits. You can hardly get him to go down for a nap right now because he never wants to stop. He's always going somewhere. And it's really hard because he goes, "Daddy, will you play with me? Can you play trains with me?" And he's learned to say please. So he's like, please. And he puts his hands up here, whatever he's holding. Sometimes it's his blanket. Please. Darn you, child, learning how to manipulate me already. So yeah, his skeletal age is actually a little behind his chronological age. And then the different ages of sexual maturation depending on puberty. So infancy would be the first year of life. Usually they kind of infancy ends when they start walking. Is generally where they would call that one. Childhood would be first birthday to puberty. And then adolescence is puberty till you finish growing. Some of them girls usually finish growing like sophomore year. Guys, I grew another like 3/4 of an inch after I got to college. I graduated at 6'1", and I ended up at 6'1 3/4. So like I still got a little bit. I really needed 6'4". So your rate of height in weights goes birth to 2 years is when you grow the fastest. Like they quadruple their weight in the first year. My son definitely, he was born at 5 pounds. He was born at 6 pounds, 4 ounces. He dropped down to like 5'9" right after birth, and that's normal. They always lose a little weight because they don't have the umbilical cord to feed them. So he was like 5 pounds, but by the time he was a year old, he was 20 pounds. So it was like, wow, that was quick. After 2 years, it slows up a little bit, and I've noticed that with my son. He hasn't been like sprouting as quickly, but he still grows. And then when they hit puberty again, that's where you're going to have another big growth spurt. So your height changes the fastest at 12 years for girls, and then 14 years for boys. So that's what I say, like that 5th and 6th grade would be 12 years. 14 years would be like 7th and 8th grade for boys. Weight changes actually a little faster, so they'll actually grow up first and then out. So that's why you'll get these real string bean guys and girls at the beginning of puberty, and then they'll fill out as they get older. So that's what that would look like here for this, how fast they grow. So females will actually start getting taller than the boys at about 1st grade. So you'll notice those like 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade. The girls are always just a smidgen taller. And then the boys will take over and get taller from 7th to 8th grade. And then it all slows down until they're 18. And girls stop growing a little earlier. So where that really applies to exercise physiology is the bone ossification. So as they grow, their fetus to adulthood, as that growth plate goes, the cartilage line, so here's where that growth plate would be right at the ends, and then growth plates right at the end over here. That's where it's growing from. So your bones don't grow from the middle, they actually grow from the ends. So they actually stretch from there. So you worry about so in your arms, it's going to be at your wrist and your elbow. So if a kid breaks their wrist, you always worry that it's on the growth plate, and that could stunt their growth. That's what you would worry about. But that's something you would just like, if somebody has a wrist break and they're young, I'd be like, you need to go get that x-rayed, and you might need to go see a specialist to make sure that it's nothing serious. So that plate closure in girls is going to happen in their mid-teens. In guys, it's going to be late teens, early 20s. So that's when they stop growing. So that's where I grew a little bit from my early 20s there. So I graduated at 19. So 19, 20, 21, I grew another 3/4 of an inch. So that calcium is really important. They used to have these old got milk commercials. You may have seen like one of those, like they had the milk mustache on people's, like all these celebrities, all make-upped up and beautiful, and then get white on their lip. They don't do that as much anymore but their big thing was lots of calcium in milk. Well, so many people are lactose intolerant that they got to come up with other versions of ways to get calcium. But what you worry about is later in life, if you don't get enough calcium, you'll start getting osteoporosis. So that's where you see that little old lady with the big hunchback. That's osteoporosis. And then they also get really brittle bones from osteoporosis. So when they fall, they break their hips. So your bone mass, your mineral density, so how tough your bones are, is going to go up and up and up till about 30 years old. It's going to hold on there. And then after 40, it starts to go down. And then in females, the place that it really hits you is menopause. So when females have menopause, you stop having your monthly cycles and you're not making all that new blood to replace it. Now your bones can get brittle real quick. So that's why they worry about that in females more later on. It does happen in males too, but it's just more gradual. Like females, it's like an instantaneous thing. Oh, now we really got to worry about this. So muscle mass is going to go up pretty heavily from birth. Young women, you're going to have 35% of your weight is going to be in muscle mass. Males, because of that testosterone, you're going to have a little bit more. You're going to peak at about 16 to 20 years for ladies and 18 to 25 for guys. So that fiber hypertrophy is going to get bigger, is going to happen earlier, and the larger sarcomeres are going to make those longer lengths as you continue to grow there. Fat deposits form when you're a fetus and then throughout life. So you want your baby to be a little chubby. That's a good thing. That means they're going to grow. My son was very, very skinny, and he's pretty much stayed that way. And there's this other gal, the Thomas family that we go to Sabbath school with. She's one of the nursing professors. She's got a 1-year-old girl, and that girl had big old chubby fat flaps on her arms and her legs, and it's like, oh, you feel like when you drop it, just bounce back up. Don't drop babies. Don't do that. That's just cute. So factors that affect all this, diet, exercise, and hereditary, you can't change. So there are people that are hereditarily are going to have a hard time losing weight or gaining weight. That's probably what I see more often is you have students that come in your high school and elementary students that I've had, and it doesn't matter how much they eat, they do not gain weight. Lucky them, I know. But even when they get older, like I've seen them 10 years later, they're still uber skinny. So it's like, darn you and lucky genetics. So it's when you are at birth, you have about 10 to 12% body fat. As you mature, women are going to be about 25%, 15% for men. And we did that in our stuff earlier. So here's again, body fat percentage as you grow. And then here would be your fat mass compared to lean muscle tissue. So this would actually include all fat-free mass would be like your organs and everything in there too. So you can see where that really takes off for guys at puberty there. So growth and maturation. So you do have neurological development in childhood. So they start getting better balance, better agility, better coordination. And that happens as myelination around the nerves gets better. So when you're born, your axons and then these nucleuses are going to curl around the nerves. And these are those things that are going to make it so you can catch a ball. So as you get better and better at catching it, or in whatever sports you're playing, it's going to get more and more around those nerves, and then it's actually going to get totally myelinated all the way around, and there's multiple layers of it as it gets better and better and better at whatever skill they're learning. So there is a physiological change in those are in between the brain and then brain down to your spinal cord for your coordinations. So those are actually super fascinating. That's you can make a whole class on myelination and coordination and all those things. But that would be like grad school probably. Take a standing break. All right, so physiological responses to acute exercises. What's acute? Short bursts of exercise. What jersey is that from? David, what jersey is that? Okay. I was like, I don't know that name. Okay. So your kids' bodies are going to change quite a bit. They handle exercise really well. So they get stronger. These are different responses. And we're going into that into detail here. So strength is going to increase as their muscle mass increases. So it's going to peak. We already kind of talked about that. About 20 to 30 years for men. Your strength, power, and skill requires myelination. Kind of mentioned that there. So the peak performance is going to require neural maturity. So the more they do the motion, the more they're going to get better at it. And you see that when you have somebody, like let's take a layup in basketball. I have players that come in that can't even do the whole left foot, left arm, or keep the right hand and right knee together as they go up for a layup. They always jump off of the same foot and they try to go opposites, which is how you run, but when you shoot a layup, you want it on the same side. So that myelination takes time. So boys have a pretty big marked change at about 12 years old, and that's the testosterone hitting will actually help with the myelination. Girls have a more gradual linear change, which also makes it why school is so much easier for girls than guys, because guys don't get that myelination as quick. And the same myelination happens with physical stuff as it does memorizing. So like girls, it's more gradual. Guys, it's hard. All of a sudden, they're like, now it's easy to memorize, for example. So here would be that leg strength of boys. So I'm sure they did this on a force plate, like how hard they could push something. So at 8 years old, so that would be school aged, and as it increases pretty exponentially, it starts pretty gradual here, and then 12 years old hits and it starts going up pretty fast. Let's see, composite static strength score. So this would be multiple different things. So this would be, let's see, what do they have on here? Oh, they do not give me so this would be different lifts, I was just saying. So like chest press, leg press, and something along those lines. So this is multiple things together to measure the total strength of the athlete or the child in this case. So before puberty, and then at puberty, end of puberty, post-puberty. Notice the guys kind of has a pretty upward trend there. Females, it actually stays fairly the same because, sorry, you don't get testosterone. Let's see. So resting and submax blood pressures is going to be lower than in adults, and it's all related because their body size is smaller, so they don't need as much pressure in the blood, or their heart doesn't need to pump as hard to get it all the way to the extremities there. They also have a smaller heart, lower peripheral resistance during exercise because they don't have any plaque or anything built up in their arteries. Resting and submax stroke heart rate, so they're going to have a lower stroke volume because they have a smaller heart, less blood. Higher heart rates is going to be near compensation for that low stroke volume. They're going to have a greater difference of AVO2, so atricular, ventricular, aorta to ventricular oxygen as it comes in and out of the lungs. It's going to be higher to compensate. So here's what that heart rate would look like. Here's what young or boys would be, so before puberty, and this would be after. So this would be, line graph shows the submax heart rate, beats per minute in a 12-year-old boy versus a mature man, same rates of oxygen uptake. So I'm sure they had to put a mask on him and they said, here's how much oxygen you get, and you get to go for this fast, at a walking pace. So as they gave them more oxygen, this is their heart rates as they kept going. Same thing for stroke volume. So you're going to have a lower one for, let's see, which one was it? Sorry, boys are the blue. And then here would be that AVO2 difference. So we already kind of said this, max heart rate is going to be higher than in adults. The max stroke volume is lower, smaller heart, smaller body. And the max cardiac output is going to be lower. So lung function is going to increase with age as your lungs get bigger, so that makes sense. So the peak flow increases with age. So post-puberty, girls' absolute values are lower than boys due to the slightly smaller body size. And part of that is just the broader shoulders, broader lung, or with more lung expansion. The lungs may not actually be bigger, but there's just a larger cavity there, generally speaking. Not all the time, obviously, but that's just generalizations there. Metabolic function is going to change, or is going to increase with age, and that's going to be due to all of those, muscle mass, strength, cardio. Cardiorespiratory changes during exercise are going to accommodate the need for oxygen. So the bigger the person gets, the more it's going to change. And that's what it's saying here is changes with age are going to have greater delivery of oxygen. So it's going to increase steadily with age. It's going to go, it's going to be lower in girls in compared to guys after puberty. So we're going to scale that data size. Their VO2 max is going to be scaled due to their body weight because it's going to change a whole lot difference. And I got a picture for that here in a sec. So to reduce the effect of body size on the data, they use body surface area or weight to the 0.75 power to try to get a more realistic what's their VO2 compared to their size. So here's how they use those absolute values there to get a VO2 compared to their age. And there would be your VO2 max. So that'd be liters per minute, and this would be kilograms times liters. So this is where they change that 0.75 there to compared to their size. So children's economy of effort is worse than adults, as in they don't know when to stop. They don't know how to listen to their body, so you as a professional needs to be the one limiting that. My son does not know how to stop. He will go until he almost literally falls over. Usually he trips at this age, but he would probably go until his lungs and hearts would not patter anymore just because he doesn't know how to stop. So you as the professional, if you have kids on a youth soccer team, like an under 8-year-old soccer team, you have to control how long and how fast they go because they will not know when to stop, and they could actually hurt themselves. But with age and their skills improving, they will learn to do that better. So children's oxygen consumption per kilogram is going to be greater than for adults. And as their stride lengths and their legs get longer, it's going to actually get easier. There's a cute little video out right now that, everybody slow down, I got little legs. It actually kind of applies because they can't keep up, their lungs can't keep up with it either. So their endurance running pace will also increase with age. It's really interesting to see like a cross-country team from like 5th grade to 8th grade and how much it just goes so much as puberty hits. It's really, really interesting. I did have a kid in 7th grade that had been doing triathlons that played basketball for me. And man, that dude could run, could barely handle a ball, but he could run. And he ended up being a pretty good basketball player by his senior year, but at first you could tell he was just a runner. He could outrun everybody down the floor, and then he'd hit the ball off the backboard and totally miss the rim. Let's see. So children are limited in their anaerobic performance versus adults. So they have lower glycolic capacity. So that's that second layer there. Restoring their PCR, ACP like adults, so they need longer rest breaks in between sets. And yep. So this would be that peak power adjusted for weight. So this would be that combo things together. Did they give me more details on this? Nope. All right, so the endocrine response, so there's surge and exercising, all those different hormones that you get there are going to surge, and then an insulin-like growth factor is be way greater than adults. Higher stress response to exercise than in adults, and in some ways that's a good thing, in some ways that's a bad thing. They can become hypoglycemic very quickly, especially at the beginning of exercise. Their immature livers are not as good at the glycolic genetic system, or glycogen, the sugar system. So children's acute response is different than adults. I think I already said that one. I literally had that same slide earlier. Also had that slide. Take a standing break. All right, here's the question of the day. Should children, so raise your hand, should children, pre-puberty, lift weights? Yep. Who says yes? Should children lift weights? So 3, will lifting weights stunt your growth? That is actually what my wife said. That was her exact question, because I was like, ooh, tomorrow. I was actually really excited for today. I got to do basketball in PE for children, and then I get to do children and elderly for lifting. I'm like, these are like 2 of my favorite subjects. I'm like, this is a good day in teaching for me. Defined type. Yep, keep going. That's not a bad. That's a decent opinion. What do you got?
I would say, like, in specific effort with the amount of weight that they're using, I feel like it should just be like weight, use just the tone muscles and like stay away from things that can like hurt their back or like larger muscles that are important to their stature of their body. So like, stay away from that.
Interesting. What do you got, David?
I think that, children can do some body weightlifting, but definitely not actual weightlifting. Heavy weights.
What do you got?
I don't think it'll stunt their growth, which I think they could do lifting just in moderation. They shouldn't be doing deadlifts or heavy stuff like that. But I think it's okay for them to like pick up light weights, whatever they have. But I think it will affect them.
Just for muscle tone, not like large PR weightlifting.
Weightlifting stunts your growth. right? Because this is something that I'm sure you've been told either by your pediatrician or by your mother or your father, or you've read it somewhere online, but somewhere you've encountered the fact that weight training is going to stunt your growth if you started too early. I want to make sure that I set the record straight. So we do have to look around. And when we do, traditionally we see that the guys that excel in weight training, the guys that excel in Olympic lifting, some of the power lifters, they're of shorter stature. There's no denying that. But I will tell you this, is it sort of a cause and effect relationship here? Is it the chicken and the egg? Did the training itself make these guys stay at a stunted height when they got older? Were they being held back in their development, in their height, because of their participation as a youth in training? Or are they in the positions they are, the top of their sport, because being short provided them some advantages? And right there we have to sort of acknowledge that, guys, that we know that because the mechanical leverages are going to be in your favor the shorter you are, because we know that the distance having to be traveled, even on a bench press, if you have shorter arms, is going to be to your advantage. We realize that it's more of the latter. It's not that it was causing this, it's that these guys excelled in that sport because of this. Now, this is where it all originates, though. This fear is surrounded by the fact that when we get damage to the growth plates in our long bones, and the long bones are the bones of your tibia, your lower leg, your femur, your upper arm here, the humerus. It has a softened area at each end of the bone. Okay, and the growth plate is a non-calcified area, more cartilage-based area of the bone that allows the bone to continue to lengthen over time as you grow. Ultimately, what happens after you reach puberty is those areas begin to calcify and fill in, no longer being adaptable in size, and that's sort of the end length of how big your bones are going to be. But because they're non-calcified, because they're cartilage-based, they're basically susceptible to some more injury because they're soft. Now, let's look at these injuries, because this is what's really, really important when it comes to determining whether or not this is a load of crap when we're talking about weightlifting causing damage here. The first type of injury that we get to this growth plate is one that actually goes right along the growth plate. And we call these fractures of these growth plates, all right? Right along the same line, parallel to that growth plate. The second one would actually involve a fracture here and then up into the more proximal portion of this bone, right, where it fractures along that line. The third type would actually come around on the area of the growth plate as well, and then fracture down through the bottom, more distal portion of that bone. Then we have the type that actually crosses all three areas. It crosses the top portion, the bottom portion, and through the growth plate itself. And then the final part here, I'm in the way, is we have this sort of crush injury of the actual growth plate right along here, but it's crushed from the top down. Now, when you look at these types of injuries, you have to ask yourself, which of these activities that you're seeing me doing here, this squat, or this deadlift, or this bench press, right, tricep push down, which of these is causing these stresses to these bones? Which? We're not getting these types of fractures and stresses applied to these long bones of our body. If anything, we're creating supportive stresses by loading our muscles up and loading our bones and creating some weight-bearing ground reaction forces through these long bones. It's a good thing. But none of them are creating these fractures. These are the types of things that occur in contact sports like football, like repetitive contact sports like jumping repetitively in basketball, or more commonly with kids, it's in accidents, things like snowboarding accidents or skateboarding accidents, things where you get these contorted impacts and forces that are impacting these bones that create these types of fractures. And I gotta tell you this, even when that happens, maybe only in about 20 to 30% of those cases where we actually have damage to these growth plates is it actually going to cause stunted growth. Most commonly, it's these real severe crush injuries that are going to cause that stunted growth. So again, you have to ask yourself whether or not this is even a real thing. Beyond that, we have some things called stretch fractures that you probably heard of. And stretch fractures are very common, especially in gymnastics. But even in that case, guys, when you look at this, a stretch fracture is going to occur more commonly, not in the growth plate areas, but more in the bones themselves, here in the transverse processes of the lumbar spine. When a gymnast does a lot of repetitive, excessive extension through their low back, you can actually get fractures here. But again, that's not something that's related to the growth plate. So it's not really a concern. Now, where is some of this advice, though, that comes to you that says, well, you shouldn't train then until you've reached puberty. You know where that really comes from, guys? It comes from the fact that hormonally, you're not going to benefit that much from your training if you don't have the hormones to support the efforts you're trying to create. If you're trying to create more muscle and you're an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old, good luck. It ain't really going to happen. It's sort of wasted effort. So those recommendations aren't based off of growth plate fears, although some pediatricians still think that because, again, they're stuck in the ways of their older thinking and sort of believing in this myth. It's not about the growth plates. It has nothing to do with that. It's just supporting your efforts.
All right, so to just summarize that, it's okay to have them do it at a young age. But I would have them focusing on good form. I would have them focusing on high reps, low weight. As he was saying, it's not worth it because they don't have the testosterone for the muscles to really recoup and grow bigger. But if kids, I would definitely do a weight training unit with young students, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th grade. I would start them in 3rd grade probably with some sort of lifting. Now it might be lifting a broomstick rather than actual weight. Or just a bar by itself, fairly light weights, but I'd be having them do 25 reps. I'd have them do squats with it on their shoulder, trying to get them to keep their back straight. I mean, I had a girl in weight training today. She's like, when I do squats, my back hurts. And she was on the Smith machine, and I'm like, oh, step back. Like her feet were forward, and so her whole body was actually forward as she's trying to do squats, instead of having her feet under her. So something simple like that, just making sure they're keeping, and I would have them use a Smith machine for squats with just the bar, trying to get a younger age. So that's what I would do. And it would be a fairly short unit. It'd be a week in a physical education class. We're just trying to get them to learn the basics of do the whole motion with a dumbbell. But it'd be a 2-pound dumbbell, going from here to here. And 25 reps, and they're going to go as fast as they possibly can. So it's not a bad thing. It's kind of where we're going with that. So weightlifting should be safe and beneficial, should be supervised, and you as the professional is probably going to be the one doing it. There's fairly low injury risk, so strength gains are actually going to happen from the neurological stuff rather than as in they're going to start recruiting more muscles to go with it, and there's not going to be any hypertrophy. There'll be a little bit of aerobic training in children. They're going to have very little VO2 max increase. And most of that performance is going to be due to their just getting better at running, like better stride lengths and things like that, better using their arms. Aerobic training, likely going to be due to a heart size and stroke volume increase. Yep. Getting close. So effects of anaerobic training, so they can get better at that PCR, gaining their ATP, glycogen can all get better. Woo, there's a big fun word there. It's going to increase. So your blood lactate threshold can go up and your ventilation threshold can go up. So there is benefits to aerobic and anaerobic training in children. Just make sure you're doing it very conservatively. You don't want to overtrain. Really what you'd be more worried about is them getting bored with it or just hating it. I remember somebody I was saying, they're like, oh, we used to do volleyball all the time. I hated it. You're bringing back traumatic injuries because my dad was a volleyball coach and I hated it. I'm like, that's like my biggest fear is I'm going to cause my son to not like basketball because I do it so much. So I'm like really not forcing a ball in his hand. Now, we got a little Fisher-Price basketball hoop and blow up balls that he dunks, and I have a great time with it, and it makes me so happy. Cognitive function. So physical activity influences cognitive skills. Oh, man, so much to unpack that I don't have time for, but man, exercise improves cognitive skills. Having exercise right before your hardest class, you're going to do better because your brain is ready, and there's actually BNFS, that is a hormone that they found in the last 20 years that increases with exercise, and that helps the myelination of your brain. Yeah, lots of good stuff there. Love that. Physical activity patterns. Oh man, I cannot stress this enough. The more you can get kids active and moving as kids, and we're talking grade school age, if they enjoy moving then, they're going to keep doing it as adults. Even though, I got some friends that they're not athletes, but they love hiking, biking, outdoorsiness, and they take their kids on backpacking trips. Father, son, as a freshman in high school, they missed school on a Friday because they were going on a backpacking trip together. I was like, go. And that kid's now in med school, and I still see him posting videos of running outside, like trail running. Like, booyah, I like it. And there's all kinds of things, and we talked about the obesity epidemic there, and it's hitting kids really hard too. Let's see. Department of Health here, how many days per week people are being active as children? So this would be ages 12 to 14. Whew. So there's a decline in physical activity during adolescence. It happens more in girls than guys. Also, the biological age versus chronological age. It happens more often there. The decline in physical activity starts around 9 years old. Surprisingly enough, when people start giving their kids cell phones. The sooner you give them a cell phone, the less they're active your kid is. I'm really going to try hard to get my kids to not have a cell phone until they're driving. That's my goal. I don't know if it's going to happen. I'm going to have one of these on them. I'm going to have an Apple Watch that I can text and call them on earlier, but I'm not going to have them with a cell phone that they're going to sit there and watch YouTube and not go play outside. That's my goal. I don't know if it's going to happen. That's the goal. So sport performance in children improves, but they do tend to fall off if they get too specialized too early. So if you start having them be on a club team at 8 years old, they're probably going to get tired of whatever sport they're playing. You needed to get to your test. Get out of here. So here's some speed times in age groups there. For this would be a 100-meter swim. And here's the 400-meter swim. Notice they get faster as they get older. Faster as they get older. Oh, there's the run. 100-meter run. That's fast. There's the 1,500 meters, so pretty close to 1 mile. So one of the other things is the thermal changes there in kids. So like if it's too hot or too cold, they react differently than you do as an adult. So they have the larger the surface area, the more evaporation of heat is going to happen. So the more they're going to sweat. So they slower heat acclimatization. So it'll take them longer to acclimatize to a hot culture than it will. And graded conductive heat loss, so they can overheat faster than, so like, that's why I would always err on the side of caution. Are we going to have a game when it's 90 degrees and 0% humidity? Probably not. Just because I know that they don't deal with it as well as an adult would. Growth with training, everything's going to affect there. Want to get to there. I knew there's something really important I wanted to get to. Energy drinks and adolescence. That has been a big topic in the last 10 years because they have had people actually die of dehydration because the only thing the kid was drinking during football practice was an energy drink. He thought it was going to give him more energy, didn't know it was going to dehydrate him. So studies have shown that adolescents who consume energy drinks are, this one's interesting, here's a positive one, less likely to use tobacco, are likely also to use tobacco, alcohol, and illicit drugs. So in a way, it's kind of a gateway drug. There are substantial evidence to suggest that the risk of energy drinks posed to are incredibly hazardous and should not be consumed by children and adolescents. I had to start... I love Dutch Bros, but my high school students, when I'd give them a reward for something in basketball, and they would say, "Ooh, get me a Rebel with this in it." I'm like, I'm not buying you an energy drink, especially a giant 32-ounce energy drink, because it just does bad things for kids. So death is from energy drinks is rare, but if you look it up, man, you can find it. Like, there's going to be at least a couple every year that are going to be on the news of a kid that died of dehydration, probably from Red Bull has had an $85 million lawsuit for wrongful death. And yeah, here's some, this is all from this here. The other ones you need to take in really is concussions. And as I make sure the coaching class, they're all going to go through concussion protocol of what that is. Being super tough shouldn't kill a player. Like, oh, shake it off and get back in the game while they're dizzy or their ears are ringing. Yeah, there's so much stuff when it comes to those, and we're going to skip over that because this is my last bit. There we go. Let's see what I got here.
With the obesity epidemic among young people, parents are looking for ways to help their kids get and stay fit.
Yes, and one possible solution is controversial: weightlifting. CBS 2's Dr. Max Gomez tells us whether kids can lift weights or do other adult-type sports.
It's part of many adult exercise programs. Weightlifting builds muscle, of course, but also burns calories, increases bone density, warding off osteoporosis, and has a number of other health and psychological benefits. So then why is weightlifting controversial for kids, especially when so many of them are overweight?
One of the most frustrating myths in medicine is that kids cannot lift weights. That's not true. Kids can lift weights as young as 7 years of age.
The key is it has to be done correctly.
Kids should lift lighter weights with more repetitions. The key is doing it in a supervised way with adult supervision and doing it properly.
Fred Hahn, a renowned strength trainer, has written a book describing the whys and hows of safe weight training for kids. And he practices what he preaches with his 9-year-old daughter, Georgia, who's felt the benefits.
Well, when I used to be really slow, and then I started doing this and I got faster.
But what about other athletic activities like distance running? These days, kids tend to focus on just one sport and practice it over and over again. It's that repetitive activity that can lead to overuse type injuries.
Any repetitive motion the same exact way, the same exact time, can cause injuries to muscles, to bones, and most importantly to...
With the obesity.
That's all I got. You guys can go.